This is the Brett Snodgrass Podcast, and I welcome you to another episode of the Brett Snodgrass Podcast. Before I get into the guest of today's show, go to the Brett Snodgrass channel, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I will respond to it as soon as possible. I got a great guest on today's podcast episode, Mr. Jeremy Pryor. Jeremy Pryor met his wife in Jerusalem in 1997, where they were students. They've spent the last 20 years building up their family of 5 kids, and he created a website called familyteams.com. He believes in this multi-generational family concept, and he learned and he saw what people and family were doing in Israel, and it really hit home that he felt like the Western culture was not doing family the way we should be doing family. That's why he created this website called Family Teams. And how can you get your family to be all in, not to have all of their individual priorities, but to be rooting for each other, not competing, and even creating this multi-generational with mom, dad, kids, grandma, grandpa, and doing life together. So what's going on, Jeremy?
Hey, Brett. Nothing much. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's just an honor to be with you today. I've been studying what you guys are doing at familyteams.com, reading your book right now, Family Revision, How Ancient Wisdom Can Heal the Modern Family. And there's just so much just packed in what you guys are doing. And you're a different type of guest. I mean, I interview entrepreneurs all the time, but really incorporating the faith, family with business, it's just awesome, man. And but I want you to kind of start back. Just tell us your story real quick, and I want to focus on the family teams. I know you have some other businesses as well, but kind of tell us your story about how this vision of family teams came about.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Seattle area, and my whole experience of family in that context was just a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of areas in the country and in the West where marriage and family feel like kind of like a experiment that has gone bad. Just so much brokenness. It's like, what's wrong? And watching so many of my friends and other families sort of almost want to exist in a post-family context where it's like, maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe we just cohabitate. Maybe we just have pets. And I had a lot of empathy for that perspective because I had seen that brokenness. It's weird when you make a commitment and assume it's going to last forever, and it so rarely does. It's like, what's going on there? And so in the context of that, I was 23 years old and had moved to Jerusalem for a semester abroad, and was struck during that whole 4-month period of how often I was seeing dads with kids. Everything from the airplane to just hanging around, walking around the city of Jerusalem, both in Jewish and Arab cultures. There's a lot more interaction, and it seems like almost a lot more passion between fathers and children. That was very strange for me, just culturally. I grew up in a really solid family, but in that context, I just hadn't seen that publicly and so broadly. And so I was like, what is going on there? Where did they get this idea? And so I started really dialing down and to try to understand it. And as I began to study how they saw family, they saw it so differently than I did. So the two kind of ways I would contrast this is in our culture, we really think about family as a kind of a springboard for individual success. So you've done a great job as a mom or a dad if your kids are thriving, if they've launched out of the nest, and everyone is excited about their own individual pursuits. If the mom and dad especially have their own individual lives and those are solid. Those are things that we really want to see, and we don't want to see the people doing a ton of sacrificing for the family if it comes at the expense of their own individual achievement. Contrast that with really the way that classical cultures thought about family, which they really saw them as a multi-generational family line. And there was a desire to see that family line progress and that it's a multi-generational project. And so you see in a lot of more classic cultures, grandparents with grandchildren, there's sort of like a progression to watch each generation. There's an understanding of like one generation sacrificing a lot for another. You see this in our country, with first and second generation immigrants, but it seems like it just disappears after a few generations. And so I really began to study that and became really kind of interested in the prospect that, oh, maybe the way that classical culture saw family actually makes a lot more sense of its structure. And the reason why it's breaking down in our culture so completely and so constantly is because we're kind of we don't really understand its basic architecture, that it's actually multi-generational and that the family is designed to work together. And when you really begin to peel away all of those elements back down to their individual components, or what sociologists call the atomization of culture, where every person really is very kind of hyper individualistic, then you can understand why the family doesn't function the way that you would expect it to. We're almost like living in the ruins of a ancient idea, and we have to each of us make a decision. Do we believe in that idea? And if so, we've got a lot of sort of archaeology to do to try to understand like how to make it work, because the trajectory we're on, it's like we almost need to reinvent it. So you really have to choose which path you want to go, like reinvent the way that we think about family, we think about these kinds of familiar connections, relationships, raising children, or sort of begin to mine the past for wisdom about the way that this is actually designed to work historically and classically. And in my case, as being a believer, also biblically, there's a lot of verses in the Bible about family. All of them assume this sort of classic idea of family as a multi-generational team. And so that's, I began to realize I can pick one of these, but if I choose to pick something different than the springboard for individual success, the way that the culture currently defines it, I'm going to have to almost relearn everything about family and kind of be re-equipped from the ground up to think about family totally differently. And so that's how it sort of started for me.
Yeah. That's just amazing. I mean, I'm gonna kind of just go personally with you because my mind is starting to shift. I mean, you're starting to get really into my head, and I'm starting to think about. So, for example, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and my wife and I are having lots of conversations. Is how do we, in the next 3.5 years, she's going to be 18 years old. How do we springboard her so that she can be, independent, be successful on her own? And you're talking, and it's almost like then we can let our hands off the wheel, I guess, right? It's like we just want her to springboard into individuality. So, but you're starting to talk about this multi-generational family and family on mission. So can you dive a little bit more deeper into that? Like, so I can kind of rethink a little bit about just my 14-year-old.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, so that's the story that I was certainly immersed in. I didn't even know there was another option. It's like then trying to help your children be as individualistic as possible. Um, so the way that I guess ancient cultures thought of that, first of all, for them, that would have been an incredibly dangerous idea. So if you raise your children to be very individualistic, then in a time frame or a place in which there are real dangers constantly coming at you from wars to famines, to disease, and that the family was just constantly being hit by one wave after another of crisis. If you launched all your kids out, you would be in big trouble. And so that's why what you're describing only really begins to become even an option in a place where you live in a relatively safe and stable culture for over generations. Um, and what I began to wonder, and this is kind of where I got really excited about this as a dad, if you study if you begin to live in a culture like ours, and you have this, what sociologists call the assumption of stability, which is what creates that individualism. If you choose not to go down that road and you choose to live like a team instead of like a group of individuals, if you study the very, very small percentage of families that have made that decision, they have an enormous influence over the culture. Um, and their ability to build multi-generational wealth, their ability to really do much greater things is vastly magnified. And you could even talk about that. Probably, you could tell the story of even our American culture based on the few number of families who've chosen to continue to live multi-generationally because they've had such an outsized influence in politics and business. um, and so I think that whereas I would say it's certainly fine to launch kids out, like I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. Um, I think that it may be very short-sighted to think that way.
Hmm.
And I first thought about this, I thought about it in Israel, but what was interesting, so this caused me to want to start businesses instead of just be an employee for my whole life. And so I began to do a bunch of entrepreneurial businesses. Again, it wasn't necessarily because I felt like I was particularly wired to be an entrepreneur. It was really thinking about the future and wanting to work with my family and wanting to have access or control over my schedule and my work enough so that I could integrate them into family. And my first business that I started, we brought on an investor, and I remember every month I'd go to a board meeting, and he would sit there with his. He had three sons. They were all in kind of their late 20s and early 30s, and he would spend 3 hours in this board meeting. Oftentimes, he would pause the board meeting to teach his sons different things that are happening in our business as kind of like, teachable moments or launching pads for his for helping them because they were going to inherit. They were partnering with him and beginning to steward this large portfolio of businesses. Um, I remember one time sitting in that boardroom, it suddenly occurred to me that this man was spending more time with his sons in their 30s than I knew of any dad spending time with their kids while they were living at home.
Hmm.
And I, that really got me thinking. I was like, is that like that's really interesting? And I made a decision at that moment, and I had I think three little tiny kids at that point, and the decision I made was I don't necessarily I never want my kids to feel forced or like they have to work with me or something like that. I think that there are seasons where it's really healthy for kids to go off or for them to especially spend time figuring things out. But the decision I made is if one of my kids wants to work with me in their 20s, 30s, 40s, whenever, I want to live a kind of a lifestyle where that's a possibility. I don't want to live a kind of lifestyle where that's impossible. And I'm curious what will happen if we do that. And so we made a decision to do that as a family when our kids are really young, so that now my kids are 21, 20, 17, 15, and 12. I have five kids. And so the 21-year-old, her primary job is working with my wife. They started a sewing studio. And then she also works with me in family teams. My son and I started a real estate investment company. And so we're experiencing this because we made all kinds of decisions while our kids were young to live a kind of lifestyle in which it's possible to integrate them into elements of our work life. And what this has created is, and this all comes out of this idea that maybe families were actually designed to work together, like as opposed to this modern idea that what's actually better, and this is kind of what I would say I'm pushing back on, is not necessarily, I don't want to tell people that, launching your kids out is wrong. What I really do want to challenge is the assumption that it's better to not work with your kids or to disintegrate the family. Is that ultimately better? Why do we assume that it's better? Especially if you have a really good relationship with your kids and they have a great relationship with you. I understand there's toxic families, there's reasons to to move on, but the assumption that in a healthy family, it's always better to hit the reset button every single generation. I became convinced that's not. I just don't believe in that. I don't think that it's better. That could be a universally true statement. And so I began to explore personally and really study families historically that have persisted in working together as a team and just been absolutely blown away by the outsized impact they've had. And also there's a beauty to it that I think I just was attracted to, which was the idea that familiar relationships could sit at the center of your life.
Mm.
Um, everyone's looking for identity in our culture, and what we tell people culturally is you have to find that in the workplace as an individual. You can't build your identity in any way that's associated with other people, um, because people are unreliable. And the whole point of getting married and making a covenant and having children is to actually create a center of relationships that is reliable. So why and this and so there's a bit of a tension here, which is you can understand why families are falling apart. In other words, if you basically entered into an agreement to get married, have children for the sake of having these deep permanent relationships, and then you believe that the meaning in your life is found outside of those relationships and always to be pursued outside the family and in the workplace or in other identities that you can experience as an individual, then it isn't surprising that that original set of permanent relationships is going to feel impermanent. And if, especially if it gets in the way of identities that you're pursuing outside the family, then it seems almost like obvious that it needs to that those relationships then become unhealthy and you need to separate from those people,
Mm.
even if they're your spouse or your children or your parents. And this is a very new idea. And I'm looking at this saying again, my point here isn't to say that it's obvious that the family is a better context for identity. I'm just saying, man, it's not obvious to me that the individual we figured it out when we made this transition.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of like a bit of a living experiment. You know, we live with my parents. We're trying to figure this out. And I am more convinced than ever that there are really healthy and really very meaningful ways to pursue life in and through the family, as opposed to just through your identity as an individual.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, you talk about that work identity in your book, and I want to dive into that a little bit as well. But I really want to dive into, so let's just say someone's really listening right now and they want to do this. They want a family team, and they've been finding their identity outside of the home. And you kind of really talk about that family team mission or that family team vision. And it's funny because I've tried to do a little bit of this with my family, and I own my own business, and we're always talking about vision and our mission statement and our core values, and we're always talking about those things. And when I've tried to bring it into the family, it just seems maybe I'm not as consistent with it, and it seems like it's just more difficult for me
Yeah.
to incorporate it within the family because maybe they're just not entrepreneurs, they're not business people. I have little kids, and I'm like, well, they don't understand this, and and
Right.
it's just chaotic most of the time. So let's talk about that. Like, how do you incorporate the family team vision?
Yeah, that certainly is a challenge because it's the problem with trying to integrate these things into the family is that you're always going to feel like an immigrant in your own family at some level because you're imposing on your family something you didn't grow up with. And that can feel very strange. So I think the first thing I always say to guys is, and women who try to do this is, it's going to feel weird. And you're going to have to take the hit, and some generation has to take the hit to restore this. And by the hit, I mean feeling a little like a foreigner. Like my kids, this is very normal to them. Like
Hmm.
they grew up in a family team. They know what that's like. They value it. They make very native decisions as members of a family team. For me, all those decisions are really kind of intentional, and at least at first feel a little bit awkward and tough. So I think first of all, just saying yes, there's going to be years of that kind of tension you're going to feel. Like, oh, this doesn't feel like the right place for this or something. And that's why
Right.
I spent so much time immersing myself in stories of multi-generational families that have done this historically, because part of that is just trying to overcome that feeling of awkwardness or whatever. And then I would say, in terms of like, you know, I think one way to think about the family mission thing is I really like to ask, like, does your family have any assignments? Like sometimes it can feel too much to say, what's our mission? Like, let's go away on a retreat and like write the epic mission statement for our
Mm-hmm.
family.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's tough, and sometimes that could actually be kind of destructive because as new members come into your family and people begin to like with new kids or marriages or whatever, there is going to be a shift
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what the makeup of our family. And so sometimes, that shift can feel weird because the who pre-existed the why or the what, and that's what's interesting about family. Again, that's one of the dynamics of an identity that comes from relationships first. And so you never want, the what of the family to destroy the who. This is the
Right.
one place where that doesn't get to happen. You don't fire your kids, for example,
Right.
like you might in a business. And so you have to, so you can insert mission into this context, but I think it has to be done with a lot of respect for the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I like to do is bring to my family assignments I feel like I have or missions that I feel called to, and then to begin to probe with the family what things we can do together. And then what we like to do is just dial up our focus on shared mission.
Mm-hmm.
So if me and my wife or my kids, we feel like we can do this together, it starts to get more and more of my attention. Instead of just asking like, what do I feel like doing, or what am I passionate about personally, those kinds of questions being the only thing that drives my decision making. And I don't want anyone else to have any, influence over that. Instead, and this is why we started doing family teams, honestly, because, this was just something. I have a lot of things I'm passionate about, but this is one thing that I can do with my wife, with my kids. And there's other things. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I got into real estate investing. I'm not particularly excited about properties, but my son is in the trades and loves that stuff and wants to work with his hands. And so, I'm starting. So that's something I do enjoy it. I mean, most of our businesses have been more in the tech world, and there's no one in my family at this point that's like super invested in it. So I just started shifting, my attention to areas where that Venn diagram overlaps with my family. And then similar with missions, if there's like passions we have, like our family, we spent, a lot of time living in Israel, and that's a very deeply shared passion. All of my kids have studied Hebrew. They all absolutely love immersing themselves in that culture and trying to understand, things from kind of a Middle Eastern perspective. And so there's a lot of investment went in that as I watched my kids come alive, as I watched my wife come alive. And so it's kind of a dance as opposed to like you know, like sort of carving that in stone
Yeah.
and then telling your family, do this if we're going to be,
Yeah.
like that. That's a little too intense.
No, I definitely agree. Well, I want to dive down. So there's some different like resources and tools that you've talked about. So one is you get the vision, and then you come together as your family, kind of have that board meeting, that meeting. So talk about that, what that looks like. I mean, and so in my business, our team meets once a week. We talk about higher level things, little vision. But what's a
Yeah.
family board meeting look like?
Yeah. So we do kind of a family team meeting every week on Sunday at 11 a.m. And we get together, and includes our five kids, plus anyone who's living in our house. Got two nephews living with us right now, so it's evolved over time and the kids kind of got introduced to the meeting when they turned about 8 or 9 years old. Before that, it was just me and my wife. And so basically, it's carved into a couple segments. So I just do highs and lows. I really want to teach my kids, again, relationships first. The whole point of this is that we're listening to each other. We love each other. So I really encourage the kids to ask each other questions if they're surprised by somebody's high or low, or don't, like, oh, tell me more about that. So it's about 15 minutes where everyone kind of just catches us up on, what's going on in their life and how they're feeling, and make sure that, we're really up to speed on that. And then we move from that into, we just call it, it's an acronym CAV, call it CAV, just so we can remember it. But it goes calendar, announcements, vision. Took us a while to figure out that that's a really, because I didn't want to prepare for this meeting. And so what's really cool is I'll show up, and then C is calendar. So we'll look at the next couple of weeks in our calendar, we'll look at our rhythm, like what's going to happen. And oftentimes that leads to, oh, I forgot to announce that, oh, this happened this week, or this is going to happen in a couple of weeks, or next month we're doing this, or have you guys heard about this? This is impacting our calendar. And then what oftentimes happen is some of the, let's say we said, okay, guys, we're going to host this thing. It's going to be cool. I need your help. We're going to, have some friends over. We're going to do this. And one of my kids might say, like, I don't know if I really want to do that or whatever. And then my wife would always say, hey, Jeremy, I don't think that they've heard the vision for this.
Mm.
So that happened so many times that I'm like, oh, let's just make that a part of it. So usually there's one or two things that are on the calendar that we're trying to do as a team that we want our kids to voluntarily, opt in or not. I mean, it's up to them, but we don't want to make it a requirement. And so, but I do want to have the chance to just cast the vision.
Mm.
So I do a lot of vision casting at that point. So I spend like 5 minutes just kind of, hey guys, this is the big picture. This is why we're doing this. This is what your engagement would look like. This is why we'd love to do it with you. If you're too busy, or, there's other things you have going on. But there's a constant, like, what I like to think of as just as more of a gravitational pull towards the family team, instead of like this rigid, like, thou shalt,
Mm.
bend thy life around our family. Like, I don't want it to be a power control thing. I want it to be very inviting and exciting, and there are seasons where, the kids do need to do stuff that is pretty on their own.
Mhm.
And so we're really comfortable with that kind of coming and going sort of thing. But this meeting really creates this, this really center point. And then the last thing we do at the meeting is improvement. So we try to do one. tackle one major improvement to give it to the household, like what's working? Are people leaving dishes out? Or people, are the kids, bickering? Is there, we're not having enough fun as a family?
Hmm.
Like is there something that needs to be improved? So I always ask, like, what's not working? Like, is there something we can or something we can improve? And so usually we kind of deal with one major issue a week, and that's our meeting.
I love it. That's awesome. You also talk about the 7 day family. So this kind of goes along with the meeting, and you talked about your calendar, the week. And I got your calendar, and my wife and I were filling that out. Probably not all the way correctly, but it's kind of like our calendar, and we post it, and the kids can see it, and they see what we have going on. But you talk about this 7 day family, this 7 day week thing, in business, we're talking maybe 90-day rocks or goals or monthly things going on, but you really focus on the 7 day week, right? So why do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would say, and we do a lot of the annual 90-day things as well. But the way I think about the 7 days is it's the framework that helps you figure out like how to do everything. Like we need a frame. Like the family is rough. I mean, there's so much going on, and the more complex your family life is, the more you need to have a robust framework to balance everything. And that it really does have to be balanced, and that there are real trade-offs. If we say yes to this kid joining soccer and there's 4 practices a week, that's going to be a massive impact on the family. And we're accidentally saying no to all kinds of things. Do we want to do that? And so in order to make sure that we're leading from the family first and not just allowing every activity and every desire and every sort of impulse to basically dominate the family's life, we have to move into life with some degree of structure and like awareness of what are those things, that those sort of activities or rhythms that are really important to our family. And so we've spent the last 15 plus years just designing and upgrading a 7 day rhythm for our family. And we're, it's always a negotiation. There are things that we can add or whatever, but or take away. But that crafting that has been a really critical framework so that our family is not at the whim of every kind of thing that might pull it apart, because the gravity is always the other way if you don't do this. Like
Hmm.
there are so much that's going to try to sort of pull your family, everything we do, whether it's sports or education or even church, shopping, media, wants to separate your family into its individual units and create a whole world for kids that are 10th grade, moms, whatever. So that's why I'm such a big believer in proactively designing a 7 day rhythm. And so we have our 7 day rhythm, and it's got lots of elements to it that we have time tested, and it's super life giving for us. Our desire is that it not tyrannize us, but that we love our weeks,
Mm.
that we learn to live a week that we love, but when we live it every week. And so there is a lot in there, but that's kind of our philosophy. That again comes really from something that we learned in the Middle East. They live in a very cyclical way, especially in Jewish culture, because of the Sabbath. It forces them into a rhythm of 7 days. The convenience stores in Jerusalem say open 24/6. It's just such a part of the culture where they live into this day of rest, and it has this ripple effect on the rest of their week. And so that's how it started for us. We started to keep a day of rest as a family. But if you do that, you start to really feel this drumbeat of 7 days,
Hmm.
because carving out a day to rest is very dramatic in terms of what it does to your body, what it does to your sort of life and your schedule. And so the day before becomes a certain kind of day, the day after becomes a different kind of day, and then it just has this kind of ripple effect. And before you know it, you're living in this rhythm of 7 days.
That's awesome. And let's talk about the day of rest. So obviously, man of faith, talk about the Sabbath. It's very biblical especially in Israel, and to celebrate the Sabbath and to have that day of rest. Obviously, you don't see that as much in the Western culture. anymore, especially in the entrepreneur family. We're always on. We have our devices on us. We're always working and emails and social media, and we seem like we don't rest. And or we're busy on our rest days, cleaning the house or doing tasks or whatever, mowing the grass. So what's that day of rest look like for you guys? Number one, and then how do you get your kids to buy in to that as well?
Yeah. Well, one thing that there's a few kind of associations a lot of people have with a Sabbath day. One is it's the most boring day of the week.
Yeah.
It's like the day where you say no to everything.
Right.
And because we never came at this from any kind of religious, perspective. This was really purely like, oh, here's a tool that could help us, recover and really draw together as a family. We didn't feel any pressure to have any rules around it about which day it should be or, what to do on it. And so it's kind of a blank canvas. But I did have a few goals. One of them was I wanted my kids to love this day more than any other day of the week.
Hmm.
To your point, if it's going to succeed and my kids hate it, it's not going to succeed. Like they're not going to do it with their kids. They're going to be like, yeah, my parents had that weird thing we had to
Yeah.
do. I hated it. And there is a sense, and too, culturally, where the Sabbath was supposed to be the zenith of the week. It's the time where it's not just about stopping work. It's about enjoying life. It's about enjoying all that you have done. Like when do you pause and just like love, like immerse yourself in art, immerse yourself in hobbies and things that you really don't get to do. So it's a real freeing day. And so another thing that we learned about Sabbath is that people oftentimes approach a day of rest and they actually think it's easy, and that they think that all you have to do to rest is to stop working.
Mhm.
And that is not true. We don't, like you said, like the devices are going, the market's going, the customers are there, the schedule is going to come at you. Like it's similar to what I said about, sort of you have to begin to impose some order on it in order to actually find your off button. And finding your off button for a day of rest is going to be a journey for most people. It took me a long time to figure out what actually created a full recovery. But if I could say like what it's incredible what started happening when I actually could rely upon. I know that I can fully recover in 24 hours. I started working much harder. My weeks got a lot more productive
Mhm.
because I could slam into the Sabbath. I didn't have to. I didn't have to hold anything back. I knew I was going to recover. I knew how I was going to recover. I could rely on it because we were very. This took us years to get very consistent. But once we got really consistent, um, our productivity definitely went way up and not down. But that there can be a transition for some people where the productivity does take a hit initially. And the way that we sort of found our off button was we had to start to carve out the Sabbath day into different kind of blocks. So there was like early morning, mid morning, late morning, early afternoon, mid afternoon, early evening, evening. And so we just started playing kind of Tetris or Legos with those blocks, and said, okay, what is something that we could do? And when our kids were little, April, so early morning looked like me making pancakes, her going to a coffee shop. Okay, that worked really good, and then she'd come home, and then we go out for a little outing, walk in the woods. We would have a date night at the end. Like, now that our kids are older and we don't have to like watch them during our Sabbath days, I tend to go to a coffee shop in the morning and do like a lot of meditating, a lot of like journaling. I do, I really enjoy that, just processing, reading. And then I grab one of my kids and take them out to lunch. We have like a deep, oftentimes hour, 2 hour one-on-one. Sometimes certain seasons, afternoons, we would all go out to a park and so there's these blocks are kind of free. What's great is the one rule is don't do anything for the sake of being productive. Like, so the one
Mhm.
thing that really will obviously kill a day of rest is if like, let's just throw this in there because we have to do it. It's like
Mhm.
Sunday for us because we rest on Saturday. Sunday became our family work day. So we know we have a day for that. Saturday is not for that. Like for us, it's a day for us to recover. So,
Mhm.
but that's kind of how and it just we had to give ourselves a lot of permission to do it badly for a long time until we figured it out,
Yeah.
because it did take us a while, and then we started finding some tools that helped us out.
Yeah. So, just one more question on that day of rest with your kids. So yours is on Saturday. So do you try not to have any sports, soccer games? Your kids aren't allowed to do any of that stuff on Saturdays, or maybe they want to stay at at a friend's house, something like that. Like, what's all that look like?
Yeah. Yeah. The way that for us that worked was we would, first of all, a lot of those activities that tend to happen on Saturday, we kind of wanted to always go one layer deeper and say, what are you like, what are you looking for here? Like, is it, you need, you know, are you looking to create a soccer career or are you looking for an activity, to do physically? So what we chose to do is, as our kids got more and more into like team sports or whatever things, we would start to do that as a family team. And then we would always look for things that we could do that we could design around our rhythm. So we had a whole season where we were all into tennis and they were able to do doubles. And, we did all that around our family, did that for a while. Then we did, 3 years of Taekwondo as a family. Again, we had our own lessons. Our kids were able to, engage in ways that were designed around our rhythm. And so there was a lot of proactive things we did to eliminate the possibility that someone else, a coach or somebody, was going to schedule something on our day of rest. And then it became really well known over the years. And this at first it was a transition
Hmm.
where people were like, why, like, what are you guys doing on Saturday? Like, why? So if we said no to something, because, that's hard. But again, that's another one of those things about taking the hit I described earlier. It's like, you have to decide, what you're going to sacrifice. The family just always sacrifices, it's like the family always takes the hit. It's like, no, sometimes things outside the family are going to take the hit. And so we had to go through that transition. Now people are very aware that we will be there to help you or show up at your party on Sunday, but if it's Saturday, we may not be there. Now, sometimes we do go. It's like there's no rules. Like,
Hmm.
again, the goal isn't to set up a bunch of rules. The goal is to ask what's restful.
Hmm.
And if something sounds incredibly exhausting, then we'll probably say no. If something sounds like really fun, or we can kind of like, come late and leave early or something, um, then we'll oftentimes participate, right? So, but yeah, if there's a wedding, we'll be there for sure. But
So
we're gonna,
let me ask you this: like,
yeah,
what's your like Sabbath day just kind of look like? Can you just give us, a few things for you personally?
yeah. So in the morning, I head off I have one coffee shop I only go to on Sabbath. I don't go there to work. It's just and I do journaling. I spend some time praying, reading, and just it's very open ended. And then I go for a long walk in the city because it's downtown, through some parks. Then I usually text, a couple of my kids and see who's open for lunch. And then I come home, catch up with what's going on here, and then take one of my kids out, and we usually go grab a brunch or lunch somewhere, depending on what time it is, and we just spend an hour or two hanging out. Then I come back here, and then my afternoons are, I kind of go from, I'm pretty introverted, so I go kind of introvert, extrovert, introvert, extrovert. That's kind of my day of rest. So I'm introverting, then I'm extroverting with one of my kids, and I'm introverting again from like usually 2 to 4, 2 to 5. Then April and I, my wife, we do our date night on because our energy is actually at a peak. Extrovert, both of us are really introverted.
Hmm.
So by the time our day of rest is over, we can't wait to hang out with each other, and we have a really fun date night, sort of plan. So we do that for like 3 hours. I'll oftentimes take a nap also in the afternoon, 2 to 4, for like an hour. So then we hang out until 8 o'clock. My dad comes over and does a game night with our kids when my wife and I are at our date night, and so they love that. My parents love that. So they're all getting to do that. That's kind of their big, and my dad just geeks out on board games and brings just the most ridiculous smorgasbord of snacks and stuff. And so they're all loving that. And then we usually come home from our date night. The kids are, finishing up playing games with the grandparents. And then we start hanging out with our kids. And, kind of that's our Saturday night.
That's cool. I love it. So one other thing I want to talk about is you said a great place to start. So obviously a lot of this sounds a little bit overwhelming. You're like, okay, where do I even start? And you mentioned a great place to start is crafting a family meal.
Yeah.
And I'm for one, I believe in dinners. We always try to sit down for dinner every single night, and we go around the table saying, "Hey, I learned this tips like what's your best part of your day? What's the weirdest part of your day?" Just to kind of have some fun with
That's
it.
cool.
So we kind of go through that. So I'm a big guy who loves to have dinner with his family. I think it's really, really important. But you go a step further with that. So talk about this crafting the family weekly meal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah, like you just described, we're really familiar in our culture with what I think of as the catch-up dinner, which is like we're all living our individual lives. We need to like catch up and check in with each other, and those check-in dinners or catch-up dinners, I think, are critical during the week. What we're describing is something very different than that, in that it's like it's a place for us to actually, it's a long dinner where we're experiencing kind of the fullness of our family nest. And I didn't even know this kind of thing existed. I mean, it's the closest thing we have in our culture is Thanksgiving dinner, I guess,
Hmm.
and or maybe Christmas dinner, which a lot of people don't have great connotations around because we're very out of practice. And then we get together with our family and we're like, who are you again?
Right.
And why do you believe that political idea? And then the whole thing blows up. But we have in sort of Jewish culture, it's so fascinating to watch on Shabbat. Everyone just like going to their parents' house, even in their 30s. See people on buses and stuff. Everyone is going and experiencing what we do maybe once or twice a year, every single week. And I began to wonder, like, what kind of culture does that create? And so when you think about multi-generational team on mission, if that's what family is, if you craft a really good family meal that you love, your kids love, it becomes such a deep part of your family culture that your kids want to bring their kids to it. You won't be able to stop a multi-generational family from emerging. You will just start thinking multi-generationally. We're so infrequent in our connection between the generations that it's understandable why we hit the reset button every generation. Why we rarely experience this kind of multi-generational family. And so we craft this family meal for us this Friday night. The way it looks is that we always start with, um, I just say something kind of big picture about why we're doing a day of rest, what it is, what this meal is for, what it's about. We usually have about 15 people at our typical, Sabbath dinners on Friday night, and lots of family members, extended family. My parents always come, my wife's mom. And so the oldest member of the family blesses, the oldest, male of the family blesses the sons. The oldest, woman in the family blesses the daughters. Everyone at this family meal is their family role. Like a father's a father, a mother's a mother, a son is a son, a daughter's a daughter. That's played out symbolically and in like how we interact, where we sit, how we bless each other. And that's what I mean by it's like this immersive family experience. We believe family is a good thing. We believe these roles are beautiful and good, and we want to have the pinnacle of our week be an experience of those family roles. And so that and then I love cooking, so I usually cook those meals. We have a song we sing. My wife lights a candle that sort of commemorates the beginning of the day of rest, and she always says blessing over that and has a few words to say about the Sabbath. And then we eat the meal together. We oftentimes do like a remembrance or some kind of celebration. Many of our Shabbats have themes. I'd say over half of them have a theme. And so the theme could be somebody's birthday where we ding the glass and we'd say something, and those are super fun. We toast to whoever is their birthday with everyone usually sharing one thing, or like we have one coming up where it's my grandpa's Pryor's birthday. He would be, over 100 now. He died, over 20 years ago. And so my parents have been preparing for that Sabbath dinner with like pictures, slideshow, like stories from his life. So we remember different, major events in our family's life. We remember our ancestors, going to the past. My grandpa who served in World War II, we can tell a lot of those stories once a year. And then after the meal is over, the kids all clean up and they play like really loud music, and it's super fun dance party. We always do a kind of dance party at the end. And so we help them with that, but then the kids really take the lead and they love that. And then after dinner, we sit around, talk, coffee, dessert, like really relaxed evening, build fires, sometimes play a group game, and no one has anywhere to go. Like we're all just, here to love each other and be together, enjoy
Hmm.
each other, and begin
Yeah.
that day of rest. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
it's sort of an epic family experience that
Yeah.
we want to craft once a week.
And what day of the week do you do this? Do you not do this on your Sabbath day? What day do you choose to do this meal?
Yeah, it's Friday nights.
Okay. Awesome. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
So ours is Friday night, and what's unusual about in the biblical rhythm, in Genesis, the day started in the evening, and then they, ended the sunset the next day. So our Sabbath starts on Friday night and ends Saturday night, as opposed to Saturday morning, to Sunday morning. So that I really like that because then you're sleeping in the middle of your rest day, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
And so so yeah, there's a lot of weaving together of the launching of the day of rest and the experience of the familyness. If people aren't doing a day of rest, I still think it's super important and encourage people, if they can, to have an epic family meal any day of the week where they can set aside, a couple of hours and make it really fun. Like you could start with pizza and paper plates, special drinks. We definitely did not start with this sort of epic meal with parents involved and stuff like that. That came like literally about 10 years into that practice, where we got, we got better and better at it, more and more comfortable with it. Sustainability is far more important early on than anything else. Like you can't, anything that you won't do every single week, because it's too exhausting or too confusing or too even relationally taxing. I would just say make it simple, make it sustainable, make it fun, and just see if you can do it every week. And then over time, start to add like one element at a time to the meal, and you'll never know what it'll develop into. Ours has developed into this multi-generational meal.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I just have a couple more questions for you, Jeremy, just with, familyteams.com. And so one thing, you have something on your website, it's called The Skill of Fatherhood. And it's really about how to be a father, training up your kids. And I know, when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, even me, it's like, we're busy, we're grinding out our businesses. And sometimes like we're giving our kids the leftovers, they're giving us their leftovers. And it's just, training and coaching, it just takes a lot of time. So it's almost like we just kind of shy away from it. So like what's a couple of highlights from this course that someone could take, The Skill of Fatherhood?
Yeah, I would say, well, maybe directly to speak to what you just said, something that we talk about a lot with family teams. If you're an entrepreneur, consider having a day of the week where you take one or each of your kids to work. Um, I did this for years and years, as somebody who was starting and owning different businesses. And it doesn't have to be all day. It could be like for a 2 hour stint, but man, um, it's really amazing to just grab that margin time in between meetings, even have my kids with me. And we've seen lots and lots of entrepreneurial dads do this. They don't understand that it's possible to live your life through the hat of fatherhood, even when you are working.
Hmm.
And, I got inspired, just by studying Abraham and thinking about the way he lived. He never stopped being a dad because he was working. He saw his work as a part of his life as a father. He didn't see his part. And so the question is, how do you begin to live fully as a father all the time? And one of the greatest gifts is just be around your kids more and integrate them into more things. You're going on a business trip, maybe take one of your kids with you. So there's a sort of a default that our family began to develop, which was if I'm leaving the family home, which kid am I going to bring with me? And there were times where that wasn't appropriate. I need to be too focused. There are certain projects where I need total focus, And so we just figure that out. Like, what are those, and what are the things where I'll be able to like touch base with the kids. But yeah, the overall course is to try to begin to understand that fatherhood is a skill, and that a lot of us we take it way too for granted that, oh, we know understand it because we have a dad, but most of us just we have like one model or two models in our life for what this could look like. And so part of what that course is designed to do is really help expose you to kind of the tools of fatherhood that a lot of us maybe we're not raised with. I would say one of the primary ones is to understand that dads are really designed to be coaches. Dad, like almost all men want to be part of a team. And so if they don't find it in their home, they'll find it at work, they'll find it somewhere else. We really enjoy that. That's why we love sports, or, a lot of us love just team activity or things that we get to do, but we don't know how to do that with our family. And so one of the skills that we try to build out this whole module on, like how to basically design a sort of coach experience with your kids. And then we also talk about training your kids, the process of the importance of, especially as your kids are young, getting to train them how to make that really fun and exciting for both you and your child. And then there's a whole module on multi-generational family, which is really, how do you build up those legacies, like the finances of a multi-generational family, where the uniqueness is there, how to integrate faith, into that multi-generational family lifestyle. So those are some of the skills that we like to highlight.
Awesome. Sounds good. I'm just going to ask, many times you talk about in your book, we need a new lens. So you talk about like, yeah, looking at life or your family through a different lens. You know, just kind of end there before we go in the last section of the show. So like, what type of lens are you meaning on that?
Yeah. Well, as I was describing, like Abraham never took off his fatherhood hat. He saw life through the family and not family as a component of his life. And I think this is where, for many men especially, this breaks down really dramatically. Is that you're investing so much in what you believe to be non-family individual pursuits or goals. And what I would say is, why not see those goals as nested inside of a larger story of being a father? And so if you're going to start a business, then why not think of that activity as not, this is what Jeremy's doing or Brett's doing, as an individual, but this is what I'm doing as a father in order to provide for my family, in order to get to, maybe work with my kids, in order to extend the mission of our family. If I'm going to go off on a business trip, then get my kids together and say, you guys, like, I'm doing this for us. Like, my number one team is you guys. I love you. I'm doing this for you. I need you guys to send me out. I'm going to, be FaceTiming and give you updates. I want my kids to know what I'm doing when I'm working. Like, I don't want, my work to sort of mystify them. I want them to understand what I do, why I do it, how it integrates with the family, and how it blesses me as a person, all those things. But I think that it's important that they be seen that way. And so as my wife and I, we're not negotiating against each other as individuals and trying to carve up an increasingly smaller pie. We're a team that's trying to work together to extend something. We're on the same mission. We're trying to do the same things. We're not fundamentally thinking of ourselves as individuals, but that all comes down to that lens. It's like, how do you see the world? And we're trained culturally to see the world in a hyper individualistic fashion. Sociologists said this is the most individualistic culture that's ever existed on the face of the earth. We are on such a far extreme, and so much of our unhealth is coming from that, but we're not talking about it. We're not talking about the alternatives. And one of the alternatives is you can see yourself primarily as a part of a family. And I think it's a beautiful way to see life. And for those who have chosen to get married and have kids, my goodness, like if you love that, you love your family, you love your wife or husband, you love your kids, why not think about life this way? Because it'll last a lot longer and it'll be full, it'll be much more of a rich experience for everyone if you can see the world through that lens.
Wow. So good. One thing you said in your book on work-based identity, because I meet a lot of guys that really struggle with this work-based identity, and this is so true. As you said, you can be a man in the Western culture with an amazing career while leaving your family in ruins, yet you're still considered a great man.
Yeah.
That really hit home with me because I see
Yeah.
that happen a lot.
Yeah, it's ironic. And that's why it's important to understand how, oftentimes we don't realize the water we're swimming in, right? And don't understand the stories that are deeply shaping the way we see the world. And that is one of them. Every single time you see a man celebrated for being an amazing man, we all know the devastated legacy of his family, but the great accomplishments that he accomplished as an individual. And then we prop them up as really an ideal model for how to live.
Mm,
That does something to
yeah,
the culture.
yeah,
It basically sends a message to every single man that, look, if you have to choose between family and your career, choose your career every time, because at the end of the day, no one's going to remember your family. Which is, it's really crazy is that everyone says this, everyone knows this, that in your deathbed, that's all, that's when like that this that we're talking about is not, it's some weird hidden like thing that we're not that we sort of papered over, because when everything is stripped away, people are left with their families. They're left with their family identity. They want to see their kids. They want their kids to see them. They're not wishing they'd spend more time working or achieving work things.
mhm,
And I think that is so sad that we all know that that's where we're all headed ultimately. That somewhere deep down we do value this, but we live a lifestyle that constantly violates that, and we tell stories. To me, this is even worse. Cultural stories that intentionally obfuscate that reality because, again, the stories are so powerful. And so whether they're, fictional stories, or I'm always trying to understand when I'm watching stories, like what is the underlying sort of belief system that I'm being trained in right now. And if I'm enjoying the story and I'm resonating with the characters, then that there's nothing that transforms you more like deeply than resonating and choosing to celebrate a story. And so you have to start to find stories that do match your values and where you want to head. And so there are stories, of course, that do celebrate family, and some more of those are growing, but they've been tough. I mean, we've been immersed in this hyper individualistic kind of culture for so long, that many of us, we don't know how to get home. We don't know how to get back
Yeah.
to this other way of seeing the world.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place really to wrap this up because I love you're not just telling your story and you're really trying to impact other families out there, other leaders and entrepreneurs. It's why you've written the book, guys. Go check out Jeremy's book, Family Revision: How Ancient Wisdom Can Heal the Modern Family. Go check out the website familyteams.com. And Jeremy, when they go to familyteams.com, you have a lot of great resources and tools that they can get started with. So to just wrap up with that.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, we'd love for you to get equipped, because if you try to make this transition to thinking about your family as a team, then you'll find that the toolbox, by and large, is sort of empty. Like our tools culturally are all how to raise up our children as individuals, or even how to think about marriage in that way. And so, family teams is basically we're trying to, like, give you guys tools. Here are tools, things like the 7-day calendar, things like the family meal, the skill of fatherhood, and others that'll help you find that there are amazingly powerful tools to build a family team. And a lot of you guys are learning some of those tools at work. Like, one of the craziest things is sometimes, like my favorite parenting book ever is a book called The Culture Code, which is all about, basically how to create a team environment. And it's all about work, but it's the most sophisticated book I've ever read in terms of just tools about how to build a team. And so take those skills you're learning at work to be on mission, to be a team, to fire up your employees, or work together with your coworkers, and bring those tools home and begin to craft that with your spouse and with your kids and with your generations. It may not be as different as you think, as you begin to see that. And so that's what we're doing at familyteams.com, is just, yeah, we're really like taking all those tools, trying to frame them in such a way that you can bring them home in a like relationally rich and realistic way.
Sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy. So check that out, guys, familyteams.com. And Jeremy, I like to end every show with a little fun, and this is called Jeremy's Bests. So I have 5 questions, and these are all relating to what is your best something. So number 1, what is your best book that you recommend?
My favorite book?
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite book is The Silmarillion by Tolkien. Have you ever read that, Brett?
I have not, no.
Okay. Yeah. It's basically the mythology behind the Lord of the Rings, but kind of like what I was describing earlier. I think that there are these meta stories that shape us incredibly deep ways. I probably read The Silmarillion more than 20 times. It's incredible. It's by far his best book, but it can be challenging the first time you read it. But man, it as a mythology, it's incredibly rich and beautiful.
Awesome. I'm going to check that out. Number 2, what's your best app on your phone? You
Well,
have it?
yeah, I spend most of my time on Audible. So yeah, I,
I
I
love it.
and I would, yeah, I'd recommend. I don't know if you guys probably have like done some of the great courses, or I don't know if you I am constantly shocked. I'm right now going through the second time of a 42-hour course on American history. Um, I'm just constantly amazed at, like, I paid $10 for this. It is so much better than every history class I took combined in college. So yeah, I'm obsessed with with going through those courses.
Best course. I haven't checked out the courses on Audible. I listen to Audible all the time when I'm working out, running, and I'm going to check out
Oh
some of
my
this.
gosh,
I love learning.
so good.
Sounds good. All right, number 3, best movie.
Well, maybe not surprise you. My favorite movie is The Godfather. So I love The Godfather in that, like, you see the multi-generational team. Now their mission was, not great. A lot of crime, but it was really fun to, like, for a lot of people that's their first glimpse into what, like, the power of a multi-generational family in a Western culture that gripped, Michael, who's kind of the main character, gripped his life so dramatically.
Mm.
Yeah, I've never gotten over watching that movie.
Sounds good. All right, 2 more. Do you have a favorite speaker that you like to watch?
Man, probably Timothy Keller is my favorite.
Mm.
So in my faith, he's a pastor in New York. He's no longer a pastor there, but he's got these sermons, and I'm not a huge sermon person, but his has deeply changed my life.
Mm.
I spent a year where I every morning I listen to for 20 minutes one of his sermons. It just totally transformed my heart, my faith, because he has a way of basically taking it's not a new idea every week, it's the same idea every day.
Yeah.
It's like the gospel, which is sort of like the heart of, why Jesus came and what he was trying to do to rescue us. And I lose sight of that, sort of the main thing. And he just, as a speaker, it helped me tremendously get very centered,
Mm.
centering my faith on the
Yeah.
gospel of Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, Timothy Keller, he's amazing. All right, last one. Do you have a favorite? Probably have a lot, but best family memory? Or you can just pick one. What's a good family memory?
Man, um, well, one kind of recently that kind of really struck me was, so our kids, my wife encouraged our kids to take a sibling road trip. And so I'll never forget them all getting in the van, and all 5 of our kids, and our 2 oldest who had the driver's license, getting on and just driving away for 2 weeks and going basically to visit our friends all up and down the East Coast.
Mm.
Um, it was so bonding for them, but it is so meaningful for April and I to, like, watch our kids, how much they love each other. We didn't talk podcast because it's, a whole nother can of worms, but you know, in a typical Western family, because we're all individuals, every new child that comes into the family is really, carving up a smaller pie. And
Mm.
so they're in some ways designed to be competitors with you. But in a family team, every single new member of the family vastly multiplies what we can do and who we can be as a family. And so culturally, that's how our kids experience their siblings. And so they love each other incredibly deeply. And so they have they have their spats and their moments, um, but yeah, like basically getting those, like, videos and photos as they were, like, traveling around together and hearing the stories after they came home, and knowing that they have a memory, like, that they'll never forget, and hoping they'll continue to do that all throughout their life, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
That was super meaningful.
Mm. So cool, Jeremy. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for being on the Snodgrass podcast today. Jeremy Pryor, guys, check out familyteams.com. Check out Jeremy's book, Family Revision: How Ancient Wisdom Can Heal the Modern Family. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been awesome, man. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Sweet. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.